When I was little, I developed a fear of the dark. To this day, I am still afraid. When I was 6 years old, I would call my parents every night to search for monsters under the bed or in the closet, which, it seemed to me, were eagerly waiting to eat me. Even with insects, I saw grim shadows moving in the clouds of the room or strange faces looking at me from the bedroom window. My parents comforted me as best they could, saying it was just a bad dream or my imagination, but in my young, unsteady mind, I was firmly convinced that they wanted to eat me. Most often, I just hid under the blanket until I was so tired that I could no longer be afraid, but sometimes I was seized with such panic that no one could sleep. Finally, after one tough night, my parents realized they couldn't convince me to abandon my childish fears with reason and logic. They had to resort to a trick. My mother came up with the idea of sewing me a little friend with whom I would not be scared at night. She took many colorful pieces of fabric, sat at the sewing machine, and created what I later called Rick. My mother came up with the name. He was a rag monster designed to scare off other monsters and protect me while I slept. I must admit, his appearance was quite creepy. Honestly, recalling all this, I am still amazed at how my mother could come up with such a strange and frightening creature. He was sewn from separate pieces, like Dr. Frankenstein's creation, with huge white eyes, frightened and drooping ears. His arms were made from my sister's black and white striped socks, and the green half of his face was from my brother's football socks. His head was like a bulb, and instead of a mouth, my mother sewed on a piece of white fabric and expanded it with zigzags so that it resembled a wide grin of sharp teeth. Despite his creepy appearance, I immediately fell in love with him, and since then, Rick has never left me, of course, when it came to the dark time of day. He didn't like the sun and was offended when I took him to school, but I only needed him at night to chase away the bogeyman. And he was very good at it. When I went to bed, I placed him close to the source of dread, and if something moved in the closet, he would close the door. If a black shadow slid into the window, I would tie him to the glass, and if a giant hairy beast hid under the bed, Rick would be sent there too. Sometimes monsters lived in my room, sometimes they hid in dreams, and Rick had to appear in my nightmares. I loved it when I dreamed of Rick. Together, we fought monsters and demons, and he could talk to me in dreams. He asked,
Do you love me very much?
and I replied, more than anything in the world. Once, in a dream, the day I lost my first tooth, Rick asked me for a favor.
Will you give me your tooth?
He asked. Why? I was surprised.
To kill monsters.
He replied. The following day, at breakfast, my mom asked me where the tooth was because the tooth fairy couldn't find it under the pillow. When I said I gave it to Rick, she just shrugged and continued feeding my little sister. Since then, every time I lost a tooth, I gave it to Rick, and he always thanked me. But eventually, my baby teeth ran out, and I myself became too old to play with toys. Rick remained on my shelf, collecting dust and gradually fading from my memory. But over time, the nightmares got even worse, so terrible that they haunted me during the day, chasing fear from every dark corner or rustle in the bushes. One particularly bad night, when I was at a friend's, I rushed home on my bike because, as it seemed to me, an evil dog was chasing me. I found something strange in my room. On the bed, in the soft rays of the moon shining from the window, Rick stood on his hind legs. Initially, I thought I was hallucinating again, as I had all evening, and tried to turn on the light. I clicked the switch again and again, but the darkness did not disappear. This made me nervous. And I slowly moved away from the door, not taking my eyes off the toy, reaching back and pressing the doorknob. I was ready to flee when suddenly I heard the door slam shut, locking me in the dark. In this darkness and silence, I stood as if filled with cold fear for an eternity and heard a familiar, astonishing voice.
Have you stopped feeding me? So why should I even protect you? Protect? From what? You'll see now.
Before I could blink, everything changed. I was no longer in the bedroom. I was somewhere else. I wasn't in hell, but something close. It was a forest, a freaky place where monsters hung from branches, and the ground covered with predatory insects. The air was thick with fog from the smell of rotting meat, and the night sky was cut through with pale green lightning from some creature I struggled to compare to a human. My head throbbed as if it was about to explode with pain, and tears streamed from my eyes. And in my head, his voice sounded again.
This is what your reality will become without me.
I heard the fast approaching thunderous footsteps. Only I can stop this. Now it stood behind me, huge and angry, breathing hot breath on me, steaming. I woke up before I could turn around. The next day, I sneaked into my parents' pantry, where my brother's baby teeth were kept. I gave them all to Rick. The nightly horrors almost immediately ceased, and I was able to live more or less normally again. Sometimes, I went into my younger sister's room and stole teeth intended for the tooth fairy or strangled some stray cat, pulling out its little incisors, all so that the terrible nightmares would stop. I also noticed that Rick moved around the room when I left. Rick rearranged my things and tore the curtains. Somehow, he became more alive with the proper lighting. His teeth shone, and to the touch, he seemed warm and scared me to death. I didn't have the courage to grab him and destroy him. After all, I understood what I would then be left alone with. So, in high school and college, I still collected teeth. The older I got, the more things caused me fear and the more teeth I gave to Rick to protect me. Now I am 25 years old. I have a good job, my own apartment, and dentures, and for a month now, nightmares have been gathering around me again. Today, after work, I decided to walk through the parking garage. I came across some guy. He was doing something in his car. His teeth were yellowed with cigarette smoke and coffee. I didn't care. I did everything to take his teeth for Rick when I returned home, a pair of white eyes and a full mouth of fangs on the ceiling in the corner. He asks me,
Do you love me very much?
"Love, very much, more than anything in the world."